night of July 9th to 10th, 1943, off the southeast coast of Sicily. The invasion armada knifes through whitecaps. Wind and cross-swell scatter formations. Landing craft wallow. On signal bridges, officers recite beach codes: Gela, Licata, Scogliti, Syracuse. Below decks, men check bolts and webbing, cinch packs, and memorize the first 2 miles inland. This is the first Allied strike on Axis homeland. The margin for error is thin and getting thinner with every gust. Pre-dawn, July 10th, 1943, Gulf of Gela. H-hour approaches under broken cloud. The 1st Infantry Division and the Rangers lock in on their sectors. The beaches show as pale bands between surf and dunes. Offshore, destroyers stand ready, turrets trained. Radio nets crackle with last-minute corrections, currents, landmarks, enemy silhouettes. Onshore, Italian coastal units stir without urgency. The storm has done the Allies 2 favors: noise for cover and enemy disbelief. Same hour, above the beaches. C-47s drift off course. Paratroopers of the 505th Parachute Infantry jump into darkness, meant to be precise, and is anything but. Chalks scatter across countryside south of Nissimi and along the approaches to Piano Lupo and Biazza Ridge. Small groups assemble around whoever still has a radio and a compass. Objective cards stay the same. Routes change on the run. H-hour plus minutes, Gela town and beaches. Ramps drop. The Rangers push into Gela streets, low, white, and shot-quiet, clearing corners with shotgun speed. On the open sand, the 1st Division fights through wire, dunes, and intermittent machine gun bursts. Soft sand traps vehicles. Engineers knife paths for the 1st Shermans that can claw free. Every yard inland matters. The ridge lines 5 miles ahead decide whether the beachhead lives. Morning, inland road net, Piano Lupo Junction. Paratroopers dig in shallow on shale that won't yield to a shovel. Platoons without their parent companies improvise a blocking line along the Nissimi Road. They mark ranges to the road junction, 200, 400, 600 meters. The plan had called for a regiment. Reality grants scatter companies 2 75mm pack howitzers and a handful of 81mm mortars. It will have to be enough. Late morning, Axis response forms. Italian Gruppo Mobile E splits into twin columns, one down the Nissimi Road, one from the west. Behind them, elements of the Hermann Göring Panzer Division struggle to start on time. New crews, mixed equipment, frayed maps. A Tiger company is present but temperamental. 2 tanks already down to mechanical complaints that ignore the timetable. Midday, contact at the junction. The Eastern Italian column runs into an American ambush. First volley staggered, then disciplined, rifle bar mortar. Italian infantry goes to ground. Tanks press on, rolling for Gela. Naval gunfire observers with the 26th Infantry find the grid and call steel. Destroyer salvos walk toward the road until dust becomes a wall, and the columns shear off in confusion. Early afternoon, Gela Plain. A tank-heavy German Kampfgruppe finally reaches effective range. Panzer Grenadiers dismount under small arms fire and hesitate. Without infantry screen, Panzers nose forward into 37mm and bazooka arcs, then into heavier 75mm from newly freed Shermans. The naval guns rejoin, 5-inch solutions equivalently equal to several battalions of medium artillery. Each correction lands closer. Tracks spin. Smoke pots bloom. The push stalls. Same time, eastern flank, Biazza Ridge. A thin line of 45th Division outposts buckles. The Grenadiers overrun 1 battalion, pushing survivors toward the sand. Colonel James Gavin appears with a composite of paratroopers and strays, assembles them into a rifle line stitched around 2 75s. They hold shallow and stubborn, mortars thumping at minimum range. Toward evening, 6 Shermans grind up, and Gavin orders a counterpunch. The line moves forward by yards that feel like miles. Dusk, the sky turns hostile. Friendly C-47 formations, routed over Allied guns by poor planning and worse coordination, cross a coastline bristling with nervous AA. Tracers arc into American aircraft. Planes fall burning into dark water. Surviving sticks jump scattered and late. The night takes what the day could not, discipline, cohesion, and the beachhead pays the bill in blood and confusion. Night, July 10th to 11th, consolidation under fire. Engineers reopen lanes. Artillery positions shift forward by increments of roadbed recreated from rubble. Infantry digs as deep as the ground allows. Offshore warships rearm, replot, and wait for the next call for repeat, add 50. On-axis radios, orders condense into one hope. Hit again before the Americans knit themselves together. Dawn, July 11th, decision window. 6-axis columns, German and Italian, form for renewed attack. The American outpost line bends, then stiffens. At Gela, the Livorno division crosses harvested wheat under observed fire, the casualty slope too steep to climb. A German panzer thrust breaks into the plain, and rakes supply dumps before anti-tank guns and bazookas bite deep. By late morning, the tide turns, American artillery massed, naval guns relentless, Sherman's 75s outranging Panzer IIIs. The counterstroke dies in wrecks and retreating silhouettes. Evening outcome, first 48 hours. The beachhead holds. The cost is written in wrecked vehicles and aid stations bursting. The lesson is written deeper. Naval gunfire, mobile artillery, and improvised leadership kept the door open. Inland, the British pushed toward Lentini and the Primo Sole Bridge, learning that good tank country on a map hides walls, ditches, and farmyards wired for ambush. On both fronts, the campaign's true terrain emerges, not just Sicilian ridge and road, but Allied doctrine under stress. Night of July 9th to 10th, 1943, eastern Sicily coast, Gulf of Noto. Wind rips across the Black Sea. The British 8th Army, under General Bernard Law Montgomery, approaches its landing zones. In the lead are assault units of the 5th and 50th Infantry Divisions, each carrying objectives inked on briefing boards weeks earlier: Syracuse, Lentini, Catania Plain. For many men, it's their first glimpse of Europe since Dunkirk. 300 hours above the coast. The first wave of glider-borne troops crosses the shoreline, bound for the Ponte Grande Bridge over the Anapo River, vital for opening the road to Syracuse. Wind shear catches the unpowered aircraft. They scatter over miles of coastline. Many crash into the sea. Others slam into stone walls or olive groves. Of 100 gliders, only 12 reach the designated landing zone intact. 400 hours, Ponte Grande Bridge. From the wreckage of the airlift, a handful of British glidermen regroup, no more than 80 men of the 1st Air Landing Brigade. They move fast and silent through reeds and dry streambeds, then rush the bridge. Surprise works. The Italian guards are overrun in minutes. The bridge is theirs, but with no sign of reinforcement and ammunition running thin. Dawn, Syracuse beaches. The first assault waves of 13th Corps come ashore. The sea is calmer here than at Gela. Surf low, resistance minimal. Royal Navy gunfire hammers pillboxes that fire a few bursts and fall silent. Engineers land behind the 1st Infantry elements and begin cutting exits off the sand. The port city of Syracuse waits just beyond the dunes. 800 hours, Ponte Grande under siege. Italian infantry from local garrison units counterattack. Light mortars, rifles, and a captured anti-tank gun pound the British perimeter. The glidermen hold, cycling between rifles, Stens, and captured weapons. By noon, half their number are dead or wounded. Ammunition boxes run dry. The men toss grenades, collect from the fallen, and fire until barrels glow. When the last Bren gun jams, the survivors pull back behind the bridge's stone abutments. 1,530 hours, surrender and relief. When the last rounds are gone, the few remaining glidermen are surrounded. Italian troops call for surrender. The British have no choice. Minutes later, 30 minutes too late, infantry from the 5th Division arrive and recapture the bridge. The first key to Syracuse has been bought at enormous cost. 1,800 hours, Syracuse falls. The British advance into the city under naval gunfire cover. Italian defenders abandon posts or melt away. Streets are littered with tricolor flags hastily stripped of fascist emblems. Local civilians appear, hesitant, silent, half-starved. The Union Jack rises over the ancient harbor by evening. The port is intact, a rare stroke of luck. Within hours, supplies and engineers begin unloading. July 11th, 1943, Catania Road. Montgomery's advance plan calls for a drive up the coastal road, Highway 114, toward the fertile Catania Plain, the only region on the island suitable for major airfields. But progress slows almost immediately. Behind every stone wall waits a sniper or machine gun. Every orchard hides mines. The day's advance is measured in hundreds of yards. Same day, Team Schmalz. The German commander Colonel Wilhelm Schmalz, leading ad hoc elements of the Hermann Göring Panzer Division, arrives to stiffen the defense. His team Schmalz forms along the road between Lentini and Catania, small, under strength, but professional. Their mission, by time for reinforcements. Night, July 12th, the Primo Sole Bridge Plan. Intelligence identifies a second critical crossing, the Primo Sole Bridge over the Semedo River. It's the gateway to the Catania Plain. Montgomery's staff designates it as the next airborne objective. This time, glider and parachute elements of the 1st Parachute Brigade will seize and hold until the 50th Division arrives. The drop zones are marked. The men are briefed. The lesson from Ponte Grande: improve navigation, tighten formation. But the weather has its own orders. Late night, July 12th to 13th, en route to Sicily. The air convoy runs into headwinds and flak. Navigation errors mount. Once again, the sky scatters the assault. Groups land far apart. Some aircraft never find the drop zones. Others are hit and crash in flames. Only fragments of the brigade reach the objective. Early morning, July 13th, Primo Sole Bridge captured. Scattered but determined, paratroopers assemble and strike from multiple directions. The Italian security platoon guarding the bridge collapses quickly. By dawn, British paras hold both ends of the crossing. Radio reports go out, bridge taken. Holding. Midday, the first German counterattack. Dust clouds rise from the north bank. These aren't Italians. They're advance elements of the Luftwaffe's 1st Parachute Division, veterans from Crete and Russia, among the toughest infantry in the world. Machine guns bark from vineyards, mortars find range almost instantly. British positions vanish under dust and shrapnel. Communications fail. One by one, the defenders fall back through olive groves toward the river. Evening, withdrawal and counterattack. By nightfall, only a few dozen paras remain near the bridge. They withdraw under cover of darkness. Hours later, infantry from the Durham Light Infantry, DLI, arrive to retake it. They attack at first light, across open ground. The result is brutal. German paratroopers side the assault with precise fire. The attack fails with heavy losses. Night of July 14th, command tension. Frustration mounts at divisional HQ. Radios are unreliable, maps outdated. Reports describe enemy parachute troops fighting with fanatical resistance. Montgomery, expecting a quick push to Catania, now faces a bridge that refuses to stay captured. Tempers flare. The order is given: renew the attack, no matter the cost. July 15th, 1943, the second battle for Primo Sole. A coordinated night assault begins. Parachute Brigade Commander Lieutenant Colonel Alastair Pearson argues for an indirect approach along a covered route. The first wave crosses successfully and takes the near end of the bridge before dawn. But once again, radio silence ruins coordination. The follow-up battalions don't move until daylight. German defenders, given those crucial hours, reorganize and bring down another storm of fire. July 16th to 18th, attrition at the river. The fight for Primo Sole degenerates into a static duel, rifles, mortars, and snipers. Casualties mount on both sides. Engineers try to rig pontoon crossings under fire. Every attempt meets machine gun bursts from orchards along the north bank. Air support is requested. Most sorties miss the mark or are driven off by flak. By July 18th, the British finally secure the bridgehead, but at a cost that chills the staff rooms. Catania still lies miles ahead. Aftermath, lessons in blood. What Montgomery hoped would be a swift breakout becomes a slow-motion grind. The bridge is taken, but not intact and not fast enough to open the route north. German defenses solidify around Catania. The airfields remain out of reach for weeks. The Primo Sole fight proves that even elite airborne troops can't overcome bad weather, broken radios, and rigid planning. In the first week of the Sicilian campaign, both Allied landings, American and British, had succeeded, yet neither as planned. For the Americans, improvisation had saved the beaches. For the British, planning had broken against the winds and rivers of Sicily. The next phase would demand something both armies rarely shared: flexibility. July 13th, 1943, British headquarters, Syracuse. Maps stretch across trestle tables. The 8th Army's initial objectives, Syracuse, Lentini, the Catania Plain, are marked as complete, delayed, or ongoing. Montgomery studies the terrain northward. His pencil draws a single, confident arrow toward Catania. But beyond the neat map lines lies a battlefield defined by stone walls, vineyards, and terrain that defies armor and air alike. The plan is simple. Reality will not be. Same day, U.S. 7th Army Headquarters near Gela. Dust clings to tents and uniforms. Patton's staff studies their own maps, tracing possible advances westward toward Agrigento and north toward Enna and Palermo. The Americans have momentum. Units are reorganizing fast, morale is high. They've held the beaches against everything the Axis could throw. For Patton, it's proof the U.S. Army deserves more than a supporting role. Midday, arrival of Sir Harold Alexander. The Army Group commander arrives from Tunisia with an entourage of British officers. Noticeably absent, American liaison officers. General Omar Bradley and Patton take note. Inside Patton's tent, Alexander's manner is gracious, almost detached. He listens more than he speaks, smiling faintly, tapping his cigarette holder against the table. When the meeting ends, Patton assumes approval to move inland along the Vizzini-Enna axis, expanding his beachhead. But later that evening, a formal message arrives from Alexander's headquarters. The Eighth Army, Montgomery's force, will lead the advance across Sicily. The Americans are to hold position and protect the British flank. July 14, 1943, reaction. The mood inside the 7th Army HQ darkens. Bradley calls it an insult wrapped in orders. Patton fumes in silence, then dictates a measured reply. Major General John Lucas, Eisenhower's representative, notes in his diary, "Once momentum is lost, momentum is difficult to regain." For the Americans, the order feels like a slap from their own allies. For Alexander, it is simply British tradition. The 8th Army leads, the junior partner guards. Meanwhile, Montgomery's front. At the same moment, the 8th Army grinds against the stubborn line south of Catania. The Primo Sol operation, meant to open the way, has failed to deliver momentum. The Germans, especially paratroopers of the 1st Fallschirmjäger Division, hold firm. Montgomery writes in his field diary, "Opposition increasing, terrain worse than expected. Nevertheless, our task remains unchanged. Catania must fall." He still believes the Americans need tighter control. He sees Patton's aggressive maneuvering as recklessness, brilliant perhaps, but dangerous. July 15th, the inter-army boundary shift. Alexander issues a new order moving the boundary line westward, deeper into American-held ground. This shift grants Montgomery control of the key road from Vizzini to Enna, the main north-south artery, across the island. It also halts the 45th U.S. Infantry Division, which must now redeploy over 90 miles to a new position on the American left. To Patton, it's sabotage through paperwork. To Alexander, it's protection for Monty's flank. To history, it's a lost opportunity. July 16th, Eisenhower's frustration. From Allied headquarters in Algiers, Dwight D. Eisenhower sends polite but pointed cables. His power is limited by the coalition structure he's agreed to. Decisions require consensus between the Army Group Commander, Alexander, and the Army Commanders, Montgomery and Patton. If the two agree, even the theater commander, Eisenhower, cannot overrule them. The machinery of Allied command is creaking under its own diplomacy. Meanwhile, on the ground, Patton's troops continue to push forward informally. Reconnaissance patrols probe northward beyond their assigned boundary, reporting little Axis resistance. Italian troops surrender by the hundreds. The island's western half, thinly defended, is wide open. Yet the Americans are officially ordered not to advance. Montgomery's formations, by contrast, face mounting casualties on the Catania road. Supplies lag. The summer heat turns vehicles into ovens. And British infantry, after years of fighting in the desert, are exhausted. July 17, 1943, quiet fury. Patton confides to Bradley, "If they want us to hold the flank, we'll hold the whole damn island while they argue about bridges." His sarcasm hides deeper anger. He knows the Americans can move faster. Trucks, armor, and logistics all favor speed. The British, still short of transport after North Africa, crawl forward at a walking pace. The contrast is as visible on the roads as it is in command tents. July 18th, a decision by default. Alexander's staff reassesses the situation. Intelligence intercepts suggest the Axis defense in western Sicily is collapsing. Still, Alexander hesitates to give Patton freedom of action. He remains haunted by his belief that German units might counterattack from the west. The reality, revealed in intercepted radio traffic, is that the Germans are already pulling east toward Messina. Evening, July 18th, Bradley's observation. Bradley writes later, "It was the wrong army making the main attack. The British were tired, footbound, and fighting uphill. The Americans were fresh, mobile, and ready." What he doesn't write, but everyone in the room knows, is that personal pride now drives much of the Allied plan. Montgomery distrusts Patton's impulsive style. Patton distrusts Montgomery's condescension. Alexander believes he's balancing egos, but he's actually constraining initiative. Night, July 19th, Patton's gambit. Ignoring the cautious language of the orders, Patton decides to act. He forms a provisional corps under Major General Lucian Truscott, built from the 3rd Infantry Division, elements of the 82nd Airborne, and 2nd Armored Division support units. Their mission: drive west to secure Agrigento, then pivot north to Palermo. It's a maneuver born of frustration and faith that speed can achieve what permission cannot. As the British bled slowly north of Catania, Patton turned his army west. In the politics of coalition war, disobedience can be the sharpest form of leadership. The race across Sicily had begun, not against the Germans, but between allies. July 19, 1943, southern Sicily, Agrigento sector. Dawn breaks over rolling fields of wheat and olive trees. The new Provisional Corps, assembled overnight under Major General Lucian K. Truscott, begins to move. The orders are unofficial, their authority drawn more from Patton's confidence than Alexander's pen. The columns are long, noisy, and fast. Jeeps lead the way, followed by Shermans and half-tracks. Behind them rumble the 2.5-ton trucks that define American mobility. In less than 24 hours, an entire army begins to pivot west across terrain that British officers had dismissed as impassable. Same day, 3rd Infantry Division forward elements. The 3rd Infantry Division, veterans of North Africa, spearheads the drive toward Agrigento. Reconnaissance reports scattered Italian resistance, small roadblocks, a few 47mm anti-tank guns, and mostly white flags. The Italian Sixth Army, once numbering more than 200,000, is dissolving. Desertion spreads faster than Allied movement. Local civilians, cautious but curious, watch American convoys thunder past. Some wave, others hide behind shutters. Sicily is still fascist territory, but the regime's grip has turned to dust. July 20th, Axis command breakdown. In Caltanissetta, the Italian General Staff argues over evacuation orders. The Germans, already focusing on the defense of the Etna line in the northeast, give no support. Communication lines crumble. Italian officers radio for air cover that never arrives. The Luftwaffe presence on the island has dwindled to a few battered Me-109s and Focke-Wulfs based near Catania. The once proud Italian Sixth Army is now fighting ghosts, American columns that move faster than their maps can track. July 21st, approaching Agrigento. The 3 RD divisions lead battalions reach the outskirts of Agrigento by afternoon. Sporadic sniper fire, a few mortars from half-hearted defenders. Truscott orders artillery to fire illumination rounds to test enemy reaction. None comes. By midnight, the Americans enter the city. Resistance evaporates. The port facilities are intact, a logistical windfall. Morning, July 22nd, orders from Alexander. Word finally reaches Patton: you may advance north to Palermo. The order arrives too late to matter. His units are already on the move. To the British, it appears as obedience. To Patton, it's confirmation that boldness is faster than bureaucracy. July 22nd, the march to Palermo begins. From Agrigento, the route north crosses the spine of the island, rugged, road-poor, and steep. The terrain would slow any conventional army. But the Americans are anything but conventional. Truscott's men move in 3 columns over primitive mountain roads, often single-lane tracks carved into limestone. Engineers lead with bulldozers and blasting caps, cutting curves wider and reinforcing bridges. Supply trucks follow close behind, carrying fuel, food, and ammunition, mobile logistics in motion. In one 33-hour stretch, an infantry battalion covers 55 miles of mountainous terrain, averaging what British observers call impossible speed. Meanwhile, Axis evacuation west. The German High Command, recognizing the futility of defending western Sicily, orders a strategic withdrawal toward Messina. Italian garrisons receive conflicting instructions, some told to hold, others to disband. The once formidable Hermann Göring Panzer Division leaves small rear guards and pulls east. German priorities are clear: save men and equipment for the next battle on the mainland. July 23rd, American columns converge. Patton's corps now occupies a front stretching from Sciacca on the coast to the mountain town of Corleone inland. The roads are choked with vehicles, trucks, jeeps, tank transporters, artillery, ambulances. Yet the system holds. The American supply discipline, born of industrial logistics, outpaces expectation. Every fuel truck meets its unit. Every ration line finds its mark. It is not luck, it is planning, training, and the mechanical dependability of machines built by the tens of thousands back home. Same day, Axis rearguard at Sano Stefano Crischina. A mixed Italian-German detachment tries to ambush a convoy. American reconnaissance planes spot them. Within minutes, artillery shells walk across the slope, followed by a company of Shermans. The defenders vanish. Resistance west of Palermo is now symbolic. Night, July 22nd to 23rd, Palermo perimeter. Patton's lead units reach the heights overlooking Palermo. The city's lights shimmer across the harbor. Scouts report minimal opposition. The local Italian command, aware of hopeless odds, has already sent envoys under white flags to negotiate surrender. The once bustling Axis port is quiet, its defenders waiting for the inevitable. July 23, 1943, noon. Patton enters Palermo in full view of cheering crowds. Civilians line the streets, tossing flowers, waving Allied flags made overnight. Italian officers stand rigid as American MPs secure government buildings. The campaign's tempo has shifted entirely. Within 72 hours, an entire region has fallen with minimal loss. Patton's gamble has paid off. Newsreel voice, recreation. Palermo liberated. The stars and stripes fly over the Sicilian capital as Allied forces sweep across the island faster than the enemy can retreat. Same day, 8th Army Front, East Coast. In stark contrast, Montgomery's divisions continue grinding against the German line near Catania. Every yard costs lives. The difference in tempo, British caution versus American speed, now becomes undeniable. Monty's staff bristles at comparisons, but the results speak for themselves. Evening, Patton's report to Eisenhower. In a curt message to Allied HQ, Patton writes, Palermo occupied. Resistance negligible. Morale of troops high. Logistics functioning at full efficiency. Behind the clipped language lies triumph and challenge. The capture of Palermo is more than tactical, it's political. It forces the Allied command to reconsider who leads the final drive to Messina. July 24th, Axis headquarters, Messina. German Commander Albert Kesselring reviews the situation map. Western Sicily is gone. The only viable defensive line is the mountainous ridge system around Mount Etna, the so-called Etna Line, stretching from Paterno in the east to Leonforte in the west. There, the Germans will fight to delay evacuation, not to win. July 25th, Rome falls silent. While Sicily burns, political shockwaves hit Italy itself. Mussolini is dismissed by the Fascist Grand Council and arrested. In Sicily, word spreads quickly. The Duce is gone. Italian morale collapses completely. Many units surrender outright. Others melt into the countryside. Germany now fights alone. In just 5 days, Patton's army had crossed half an island, liberated its largest city, and reshaped the Allied command dynamic. His flank guard had become the main thrust. The British advance in the east slowed to a crawl, while the Americans' momentum rolled like a tide. But victory breeds ambition and rivalry. The next phase would turn a political fault line into a full confrontation over who would reach Messina first. July 26, 1943, Allied headquarters, Palermo. Less than 48 hours after entering the city, Patton stands before a map of northeastern Sicily. His next target is clear: Messina, the narrow straits separating Sicily from mainland Italy. The city represents not only the final Axis escape route, but also the symbolic finish line of the campaign. To the east, Montgomery's 8th Army continues to grind northward toward Catania. To the north, between Palermo and Messina, runs the rugged heart of Sicily, the Mattoni Mountains, a landscape that will test men and machines to their limits. Same day, British 8th Army HQ, south of Catania. Montgomery studies reports from the Primosole bridgehead. The plan to seize the Catania plain has stalled. German reinforcements, veterans from a 15th Panzergrenadier and the newly arrived 29th Panzergrenadier Division, have dug in behind a natural fortress of volcanic ridges and dry riverbeds. This is the Etna Line, a 40-mile barrier stretching from Paterno on the east coast, around the slopes of Mount Etna, to Leonforte and Troina in the west. Each pass is mined. Each ridge is watched. The Germans intend to hold just long enough to evacuate across the Messina Strait. July 27th, the Etna Line, German command post. German commander General Hube reviews his map. His orders are precise: hold until the last ferry departs. His divisions, 15th and 29th Panzergrenadier, plus remnants of the Hermann Göring Panzer Division, are seasoned, disciplined, and well-positioned. Every approach road is covered by interlocking fields of fire. Machine guns and mortars dominate the open valleys. The German army no longer fights for conquest, but for time. July 28th, Canadians enter the mountains. On the British left, Canadian 1st Division pushes toward Leon Forte. The fight becomes a climb, hand over hand up rocky slopes under continuous shell fire. At Osoro, Canadian troops execute one of the most daring assaults of the campaign. Led by Major John Stewart, Lord Tweedsmuir, 20 volunteers scale an almost vertical cliff under moonlight. They reach the summit at dawn, surprising the German artillery observers stationed there. By morning, the Canadians hold a high ground, an ancient Norman castle-turned-fortress, turning German guns back on their former owners. The victory is small but symbolic, proof that even the Etna line can be cracked. July 29th, the Americans move east. From Palermo, Patton pivots his army toward the North Coast Highway, Route 113, a narrow road carved between sea cliffs and mountains. His new mission: drive east along the coast while Montgomery's 8th Army advances inland. The two armies will converge on Messina. The 45th Infantry Division leads the way, encountering the first serious German rearguards near Termini Imerese. Each ridge they face is a ready-made fortress, high ground, mined approaches, and artillery waiting. Every few miles, the Germans demolish bridges, blow tunnels, and crater roads. The Americans' advance turns into an engineers' war. July 30th, engineers at work. At Cape Calava, retreating Germans have collapsed a road tunnel and blasted the coastal shelf. American engineers arrive within hours. Working under sniper fire, they lash together timber, girders, and steel plates into what they call a bridge in the sky. Within 18 hours, a jeep can pass. 6 hours later, tanks follow. The pace is brutal but relentless. August 1st, Montgomery shifts strategy. Realizing that the coastal route east of Catania is hopelessly blocked, Montgomery decides to pivot his weight inland. His divisions now swing around Mount Etna, fighting through towns like Regalbuto and Adrano. The road to Messina becomes a twin-track operation, Patton hammering along the coast, Montgomery grinding through the mountains. Between them, the Germans conduct one of the most skillful delaying actions of the war. August 2nd, Troina. The town of Troina, perched over 3,000 feet above sea level, becomes the centerpiece of the German defense. The 15th Panzer Grenadier Division, under General Rod, digs in with machine guns, mortars, and artillery perfectly sighted on the surrounding hills. The U.S. 1st Infantry Division, supported by the 9th Infantry Division's 39th Regiment, attacks from the west. The first assaults gain ground but are thrown back by counterattacks. The rocky terrain magnifies every explosion, shrapnel ricochets in all directions. Dust blinds the gunners. Artillery observers struggle to find targets through fog and smoke. August 3rd to 4th, Troina under fire. For 4 days the battle rages. The Americans attack by day and dig by night. German artillery pounds every advance. Infantry fight hill to hill, ridge to ridge, often separated by mere yards. The 39th Regiment alone loses hundreds of men. General Bradley writes later, "Troina was our bloodiest fight in Sicily. We faced the full weight of a German division on ground made for defense." American artillery, 165 guns in all, fires over 250,000 rounds in a week, turning whole hillsides into gray dust. But still, the Germans hold. August 5th, the German withdrawal. That morning, patrols report silence. The enemy is gone. Under cover of darkness, the Germans have slipped away toward Chiassaro, leaving wrecked vehicles and booby traps. The battle has cost them 1,600 casualties, 40% of their strength, but they've achieved their goal: more time for evacuation. August 6th to 8th, the German evacuation accelerates. At Messina, German engineers coordinate one of the most efficient withdrawals in modern warfare. Using ferries, barges, and improvised pontoons, they shuttle men, tanks, and supplies across the 3-kilometer strait to mainland Italy. Allied air attacks hit the area daily, but stay high to avoid anti-aircraft fire. The result: minimal disruption. By the time the Allies reach the city, most of the German army is already gone. August 10th, the British advance stalls. Montgomery's troops, exhausted and undersupplied, push through Adrano and Paterno but can go no further. The terrain and heat have drained them. Casualties are mounting. The once meticulous general now faces the same constraint that limited every commander before him: human endurance. August 11th, the American coast drive continues. Patton's 45th Division and elements of the 3rd Infantry Division continue east along Route 113. Each town, San Stefano, San Fratello, Barcelona, is a miniature fortress. The Germans mine bridges and plant charges in tunnels, retreating only after inflicting maximum delay. Patton authorizes limited amphibious end runs, small landings behind German lines. The first at Sant'Agata meets heavy resistance but succeeds in turning the flank. Later landings are less fortunate. Delays and communication breakdowns cause them to arrive after the Germans have already withdrawn. August 13th to 15th, collapse of the Etna line. By mid-August, the line no longer exists. The 8th Army pushes through Adrano. The 7th Army nears Messina from the west. The Germans, disciplined as ever, execute a final withdrawal across the strait. Their rear guards fight sharp, delaying actions, then vanish. The Allies arrive to find the piers empty, the ferries gone, the city shattered but eerily quiet. August 17th, 1943, Messina falls. At 1,000 hours, U.S. 3rd Infantry Division patrols enter the city from the west. At nearly the same moment, British patrols approach from the south. There is no battle, only wreckage, smoke, and silence. The campaign for Sicily is over. Patton has reached Messina first. Newsreel voice recreation. Messina falls. Allied forces stand victorious over Sicily. The Axis routed, their last ferries vanishing into the mists of the strait. August 18th, Allied HQ Palermo. Patton cables Eisenhower. Messina secured. Enemy resistance minimal. Awaiting further orders. Montgomery arrives later that evening. The two generals shake hands stiffly for the cameras. Behind the smiles lies a silent contest neither will forget. The conquest of Sicily cost the Allies over 25,000 casualties, the Axis nearly twice that. Yet victory was incomplete. The Germans had escaped with most of their divisions intact, an army saved to fight again in Italy. But for the Allies, the deeper lessons ran beyond strategy or terrain. Sicily had proven that American arms could move fast, fight hard, and stand equal with their British counterparts. The rivalry that had divided them now forged respect, earned not by words, but by the long, burning road to Messina. August 18th, 1943, Messina, Sicily. The battle is over. Messina's harbor smolders, its quays littered with wrecked trucks, sunken ferries, and abandoned guns. The last German barges are specks vanishing toward mainland Italy. On the dockside, General George S. Patton stands before a sea of reporters, his helmet glinting in the Sicilian sun. Cameras were. The message is clear. The Americans arrived first. A few miles away, General Bernard Law Montgomery's lead units from the British 8th Army enter the city from the south. They meet American patrols in a swirl of dust and confusion. The race for Messina has ended in victory and quiet resentment. Same morning, Allied press office Messina. Photographers crowd around the two commanders for the now famous handshake. Patton, in polished boots and ivory-handled revolvers, forces a grin. Montgomery, tight-lipped, adjusts his beret and stares straight ahead. Flashbulbs freeze the moment. Two men, one victory, and a rivalry that will define Allied cooperation for the rest of the war. Narrator V.O. They had conquered Sicily together, but the campaign had exposed every fault line between them: command, doctrine, personality, and pride. August 19th, 1943, Allied headquarters, Palermo. General Dwight D. Eisenhower arrives by air from Tunisia. His message to both armies is diplomatic, but pointed. Gentlemen, the enemy is not each other. He knows that the next campaign, on the Italian mainland, will demand unity, not competition. Yet beneath the formal congratulations, the air is thick with unspoken grievances. Montgomery believes Patton's advance to Palermo was reckless showmanship. Patton believes Montgomery's Catania plan cost unnecessary lives. Eisenhower believes both are right and both are wrong. Late August 1943, Washington and London react. In Washington, the U.S. press hails Sicily as proof of American ascendancy. Headlines read, "Patton takes Palermo, first across Sicily." In London, editorials praise the British 8th Army for carrying the decisive weight of the assault. The truth, as always, is more complex. Both armies were indispensable, and both suffered from a divided command. Meanwhile, German headquarters, Berlin. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring reports to the OKW that the evacuation was a success. 39,000 men, over 10,000 vehicles, 2,000 tons of supplies. He lists with clinical precision. The Axis had lost Sicily, but not its army. German troops are already regrouping in Calabria, digging new defensive lines along Italy's mountainous spine. The war, far from ending, has simply crossed the strait. August 25, 1943, Rome falls to chaos. News reaches Allied lines. Benito Mussolini has been deposed. The fascist Grand Council has turned on its leader. King Victor Emmanuel has taken control. Italy is collapsing from within. Italian units on the mainland begin to waver. Some surrender. Others await orders that never come. German divisions quietly begin seizing control of key ports and railways. The Third Reich, once Mussolini's partner, now becomes Italy's occupier. August 27th, the after-action reports. Allied analysts begin compiling lessons from Sicily. Among the conclusions, American units displayed unprecedented mobility and adaptability. British formations maintained discipline and professionalism under brutal conditions. Air-ground coordination required overhaul. Paratroop operations suffered from poor navigation and communication. Naval gunfire was decisive, but command overlap hampered speed. The campaign becomes a laboratory for future operations, especially the coming invasion of France. September 1, 1943, Eisenhower's Staff Conference, Algiers. Eisenhower reviews a draft of his after-action summary. He underlines a key sentence. The Sicily campaign demonstrated the necessity of unified command. He knows the next operation, Operation Avalanche, the invasion of Salerno, cannot afford another divided leadership. This time, he will demand direct authority over all ground, sea, and air forces. Sicily has made him harder, more decisive, and less patient with politics. Back in Sicily, reflections of command. Patton tours hospitals in Palermo. Rows of wounded men salute him. He returns the gesture in silence. For the first time in weeks, the swagger fades. Behind closed doors, he admits to his staff, "We paid for every mile in blood, and we let them get away. That's not victory enough." Across the island, Montgomery writes in his diary, "The Americans are impetuous but effective. They have energy in abundance and an army built for movement. We must learn from them, or they will leave us behind." September 3, 1943, Italy invaded. Across the narrow strait from Messina, British troops of the 8th Army land near Reggio di Calabria. The Italian mainland campaign begins. Within days, the Americans will land further north at Salerno. Sicily fades behind them, but its lessons remain etched in every field order, every supply list, every cautious briefing. Narrator V.O. Sicily was the proving ground of Allied cooperation and Allied rivalry. It was where George Patton became a legend, where Bernard Montgomery learned the limits of precision, and where Dwight Eisenhower forged the authority he would wield in Normandy. It was victory, but not without cost. It was partnership, but not without pride. And it was the first glimpse of what modern warfare demanded: speed, logistics, and the will to adapt faster than the enemy. Closing montage, visual suggestion. Archival footage. Trucks winding up Sicilian switchbacks. Engineers repairing bridges. Civilians cheering Allied columns. Patton saluting. Montgomery writing at his map table. Eisenhower boarding a plane. Then, the ruins of Messina fade into a new shoreline, Italy, waiting for its turn. The Sicilian campaign ended with a question that would follow the Allies into every battle that came after. Could unity survive victory? Fade out. September 3, 1943, across the Strait of Messina. At first light, the calm water mirrors the wake of Allied landing craft. The British 8th Army, veterans of El Alamein and Sicily, pushes off from Sicily's northern ports and crosses the narrow Strait of Messina. Their destination, Reggio di Calabria, the tip of the Italian mainland. No opposition greets them. Italian troops lay down arms almost immediately. Some even wave white cloths. The invasion of continental Europe has begun, not with a fight, but with a surrender. Same day, London and Washington. News reaches Allied capitals within hours. Headlines call it the fall of Fascist Italy. But in military circles, there's little celebration. The real challenge is still ahead. penetrating north through Italy's mountains under the guns of the German 10th Army. For Eisenhower, this invasion is not just about geography. It's about command and control learned the hard way in Sicily. September 4th to 5th, 1943, Allied Headquarters, Algiers. Eisenhower meets with his senior commanders. The memory of divided leadership in Sicily lingers in every briefing. This time, he sets clear lines of authority. No committees, no overlapping orders. There will be one commander, he says, and that commander will command. It's a statement forged in the frustration of Operation Husky, where British and American plans collided more often than they merged. Under him, General Harold Alexander remains ground forces commander. Montgomery's 8th Army continues up Italy's toe. Mark Clark's U.S. 5th Army will strike at Salerno in a daring, amphibious landing. And in Eisenhower's private notebook, one sentence stands alone. No more boundaries that move slower than the battle. September 8th, 1943, the Armistice of Cassibile. In a quiet tent on a Sicilian airfield, representatives of the new Italian government sign an armistice with the Allies. The date is kept secret until Eisenhower himself broadcasts the announcement on Radio Algiers. Hostilities between the Allied nations and Italy have ceased. The Italian people are now free from fascism. The reaction across Italy is chaos. German commanders, long expecting betrayal, activate Operation Axe, the disarmament of Italian forces. Within days, the Wehrmacht seizes control of Rome, Turin, and Milan. Italian divisions vanish or are taken prisoner by their former allies. September 9, 1943, Operation Avalanche, Salerno, Italy. Dawn. The American 36th Infantry Division and British 46th and 56th Divisions storm ashore along the Salerno Gulf, south of Naples. It's the first opposed amphibious landing since North Africa, and it goes badly from the start. German artillery and mortars, hidden in the hills, hammer the beaches. Landing craft burn. Units scatter. Communication falters. Eisenhower listens from a forward command post in Sicily. The reports echo memories of Gela, chaos, confusion, and cries for naval gunfire support. He turns to his staff and says quietly, "We've seen this before." The answer is the same, hold. September 10th to 12th, the Salerno crisis. German counterattacks under General Heinrich von Weidenhoff push the beachhead to the edge of collapse. Tanks drive within sight of the sea. American and British lines bend, then nearly break. Eisenhower, calm but relentless, orders every available aircraft and naval gun to fire in direct support. The lessons of Sicily pay off. Destroyers move dangerously close to shore, firing point-blank at German armor. The tide begins to turn. Admiral Cunningham's log records. Naval gunnery saved the Army, just as it had at Gela 2 months before. September 13th, Montgomery arrives from the south. After fighting through Calabria, Montgomery's vanguard finally links up with Clark's embattled forces. The German line begins to crack. The battle for the beachhead is over. The campaign for Italy has begun. Eisenhower's field diary entry, September 13th. The men fought like veterans. Sicily gave them that. Every mistake there became survival here. Mid-September 1943, the road to Naples. Patton is not here. His 7th Army has been withdrawn to prepare for future operations. But his influence lingers. American columns move with speed and self-reliance learned in Sicily, repairing bridges, improvising routes, and maintaining momentum. Montgomery's 8th Army, meanwhile, continues its deliberate, methodical push north. The same contrast that defines Sicily remains: speed versus precision, audacity versus caution. Yet now both commanders understand each other's value. September 27th, 1943, Naples captured. 5th Army troops march into Naples, cheered by civilians waving Allied flags. The Great Harbor, damaged but usable, becomes the next Allied supply hub. Sicily's ports, Palermo, Licata, Syracuse, now serve as the arteries feeding the mainland advance. Narrator V.O. From the first landings on Sicily's beaches to the streets of Naples, the Mediterranean War had changed. The Allies no longer moved as separate armies, but as parts of a single machine, painfully learned through failure, rivalry, and endurance. October 1943, Reflections at Allied Headquarters. Eisenhower reviews final reports from the Sicilian campaign. His conclusion is simple: the Allies have found their rhythm. Coordination between air, land, and sea forces is stronger than ever. Command is unified under a single vision. Logistics flow with industrial precision. Sicily had been the rehearsal. Italy was now the test. France would be the performance. Narrator, VO. Operation Husky did more than open the door to Europe. It built the foundation for Allied victory. It taught commanders how to argue without breaking alliance, how to fight under one plan, and how to trust speed as much as caution. And it taught Dwight Eisenhower the hardest truth of command, that unity, not brilliance, wins wars. Closing visual montage. Eisenhower aboard a command ship, wind tugging at his cap. Allied convoys steaming north past Sicily. Ruined Messina now quiet. British and American soldiers sharing cigarettes on a dusty road near Naples. A map of Europe, arrows shifting from Sicily to Italy, then one day to France. Late 1943, Allied War College, London. A dimly lit lecture hall filled with officers fresh from the field. On the screen flickers a grainy film reel. Sicily, July 1943. Landing craft plow through waves. Tracers cross the sky. The narrator's voice echoes. Operation Husky, the first Allied invasion of Axis soil. For the men in the room, it's not just history. It's a mirror. Every major campaign that follows, Italy, Normandy, the drive to Berlin, will draw from the hard, costly lessons learned on that island. Lesson 1, Command Unity. The first and greatest lesson is command itself. In Sicily, the Allies learned that shared purpose requires one commander, one vision, and one chain of command. The fractured authority that plagued Husky, the Committee of Generals, the British Army group boundaries, the overlapping orders, almost cost them victory. After Sicily, Eisenhower never allowed it again. When he took command of Operation Overlord, he demanded supreme authority over all forces, British, American, and Canadian. No dual leadership, no divided strategy. Eisenhower's memo, November 1943. Our first great lesson: war cannot be run by compromise. A plan must have a single heartbeat. Sicily, with its confusion and competition, had taught him that hard truth. Lesson 2, the value of mobility. In the fields of Gela, Palermo, and Troia, another revelation had emerged, the triumph of American mobility. Patton's columns, fast, flexible, self-reliant, proved that war was no longer the art of static attrition, but of relentless movement. Trucks, not tanks, became the backbone of the modern army. Every Jeep, every 2.5-ton GMC truck was a link in a living organism of logistics. British liaison officers report, the Americans treat logistics as a weapon. We treat it as a necessity. By 1944, this philosophy would drive the Allied blitz across France. Sicily had been the first rehearsal for that speed, war measured in hours, not days. Lesson 3, air power and its limits. Husky exposed the brilliance and arrogance of air strategy. The paratroop disasters at Gela and Primo Sol showed that coordination, not courage, wins the skies. Eisenhower's later insistence on air-ground integration came directly from those failures. By the time of D-Day, Allied air forces operated under clear tactical directives. No overflight of friendly beaches during night operations. Direct liaison officers embedded with ground units. Constant communication between pilots and frontline observers. The skies over Normandy were the proof. Sicily's chaos had bought that order in blood. Lesson 4, the machinery of war. Captured German reports from the Kummersdorf Proving Ground tell another story, one the Allies never saw in 1943. The Germans had shipped captured Shermans from Sicily to Germany for study. Their engineers were astonished by the tank's durability and simplicity. They called it the weapon of the machine age, built for soldiers, not engineers. While Germany perfected complexity, America perfected reliability. In Sicily, that difference decided who moved and who stalled. German evaluation summary, September 1943. Enemy material lacks refinement, but functions under all conditions. Theirs is the victory of industry over craftsmanship. That insight, bitterly written, defined the industrial war that Germany could no longer win. Lesson 5, the politics of partnership. Sicily was as much a political battle as a military one. It forced Britain and America, two empires divided by habit, history, and pride, to fight as equals. Montgomery's precision met Patton's audacity. Churchill's grand strategy met Roosevelt's pragmatism. Arguments were fierce, tempers short, but the alliance endured. Eisenhower later wrote, if the Allied coalition survived Sicily, it could survive anything. The campaign tested the fragile chemistry of personalities that would later command the greatest invasion in history. It proved that cooperation was not natural, it had to be engineered. Lesson 6. The human cost of learning. Beneath strategy and theory lay a quieter truth. In the dust of Sicily's ridges, on the beaches of Gela and Licata, thousands of young soldiers learned what modern war truly meant. They arrived green. They left hardened. By Troina and San Fratello, they no longer asked why, only how far. Private Richard Hanley, 1st Infantry Division, wrote home, "We came here, boys. We leave knowing too much." Their experience became the DNA of the Allied army that would storm Europe, efficient, fast, relentless, and deeply scarred. Lesson 7. The End of Illusions. Sicily shattered myths, German invincibility, Italian loyalty, Allied infallibility. The Germans fought brilliantly, but were no longer gods of war. The Italians, demoralized and disillusioned, saw the collapse of fascism firsthand. And the Allies learned that victory carried its own shadows, arrogance, rivalry, and moral fatigue. When Mussolini fell, the world saw the symbolic end of an era. But inside the Allied ranks, Sicily became a mirror. Victory without unity is fragile, and unity without humility is impossible. Lesson 8. The Road Beyond Sicily. By the time the last shot was fired, Operation Husky had already reshaped the war's future. It forced Hitler to divert divisions from France to Italy, weakening the Atlantic Wall. It gave the Soviets breathing room after Kursk. It set the stage for Italy's surrender and the opening of Europe's soft underbelly. Yet the path north through the Apennines would prove anything but soft. The blood earned on Sicily would be spent again at Salerno, Anzio, and Monte Cassino. Lesson 9. The Birth of Eisenhower's Doctrine. From the dust of Sicily rose a philosophy that would guide the rest of the war. Unity of command, simplicity of plan, speed of execution, flexibility of response. It was not glamorous, but it worked. By the time of Normandy, this doctrine was law. Sicily was its blueprint. Lesson 10. Legacy Beyond Victory. Years later, veterans would remember the island not for its glory, but for its transformation. It was where amateurs became soldiers, where rivals became allies, and where the war began to turn irreversibly against the Axis. The historian Carlo D'Este would later write, "Sicily was not the beginning of the end, but it was the end of the beginning." It was a victory forged in error, tempered by endurance, and perfected by experience. Closing montage, visual suggestion. A Sherman tank climbing a Sicilian hillside, dust trailing behind. A British soldier resting under an olive tree, eyes closed. Eisenhower reading reports in a dim tent. The shattered streets of Palermo. A ferry crossing the Strait of Messina, silhouetted against dawn. July 25, 1943, Rome, Palazzo Venezia. Inside Mussolini's vast marble chamber, the air is thick with defeat. Reports from Sicily are grim. Palermo lost, German divisions retreating, Italian units surrendering en masse. The once unshakable dictator sits slumped at his desk, uniform immaculate, eyes hollow. The Grand Council of Fascism, meeting for the first time in 20 years, has turned against him. The vote is overwhelming. Mussolini must go. That evening, as he leaves the royal palace after a final audience with King Victor Emmanuel III, a detachment of carabinieri steps forward. "Your Excellency, His Majesty's orders," the officer says quietly. The Duce, once the loudest man in Europe, nods silently. The car door closes. The fascist era ends without a speech. July 26th to 30th, 1943, across Italy. Word spreads like wildfire. Church bells ring in villages where fascist slogans once blared from loudspeakers. Crowds tear down Mussolini's portraits, pull down statues, and paint over the fascist symbol that had decorated every wall. But joy quickly turns to confusion. Italy's new government, led by Marshal Pietro Badoglio, announces that the war will continue at the side of our German allies. The people cheer for peace. The Germans prepare for betrayal. Berlin, Hitler's headquarters. When news of Mussolini's arrest reaches Hitler, he flies into a rage. "The Italians have stabbed us in the back," he roars. Within hours, orders go out for Operation Axe, the total occupation of Italy if it attempts to switch sides. August 1943, Sicily falls, Axis collapses. As the Allies secure Messina and the last German ferries vanish across the strait, Mussolini's regime crumbles completely. Italian officers refuse orders, ships sail for Allied ports, and entire divisions melt away. Italy has become a vacuum, one the Germans intend to fill. The OKW German High Command orders elite paratroopers and SS units into northern and central Italy. By the time the Allies begin their mainland invasion, the Wehrmacht has already begun transforming Italy from Allied to occupied territory. September 3, 1943, Cassibile, Sicily. In a small white villa near Syracuse, Italian General Giuseppe Castellano meets secretly with representatives of Eisenhower's staff. The negotiations are brief, the tone exhausted. Italy will surrender unconditionally. The agreement is signed that night, codenamed Operation Giant 2, the Italian armistice. It will remain secret until the Allies land on the mainland. September 8, 1943, the broadcast. The armistice becomes public. The voice of General Dwight D. Eisenhower crackles across Italian radios. Hostilities between the Allied nations and Italy have ceased. The Italian people are now free from fascism. Moments later, Marshal Badoglio confirms the news from Rome. The Italian government has asked for an armistice. The request has been granted. Across the country, soldiers weep, civilians cheer, and chaos ignites. The German response, Operation Axe Unleashed. The German army moves with precision born of preparation. In northern Italy, SS and Wehrmacht units seize control of Turin, Milan, and Verona overnight. In Rome, the 2nd Parachute Division surrounds the Italian capital, demanding surrender. Italian troops, leaderless and shocked, resist sporadically but are quickly overwhelmed. Entire garrisons are disarmed. Tens of thousands are marched into captivity. German communique, September 10, 1943. The Italian army has ceased to exist as a coherent fighting force. In the space of 3 days, Italy transforms from ally to conquered land. September 12, 1943, Gran Sasso, Abruzzo Mountains. At 2 p.m., a formation of DFS 230 gliders swoops over the high plateau of Campo Imperatore. On board are Otto Skorzny's SS Commandos, handpicked for a single mission, to rescue Mussolini. They land beside the hotel where the former dictator is held under heavy guard. Within minutes, the guards surrender without a shot. Skorzny enters the suite, salutes, and announces, "Duce, the Führer has sent me to free you." Mussolini, frail and pale, replies softly, "I knew my friend would not abandon me." Hours later, a Fiesler Storch aircraft whisks him away. Operation Oak is complete, one of the most daring rescues in modern warfare. September 15th to 20th, 1943, the puppet regime. Flown to Germany, Mussolini meets Hitler at Rassenburg. The Führer greets him warmly, but coldly outlines the new order. Mussolini will lead a new fascist government, the Italian Social Republic, RSI, based in Salo, on the shores of Lake Garda. In reality, he is a figurehead, a ghost of his former self. The RSI exists only by German will, its army commanded by German officers, its citizens living under occupation. German Field Marshal Kesselring now controls the Italian front. His orders are clear: defend the peninsula at all costs. Italy, once an Axis partner, is now a battlefield. October 1943, the German occupation begins. In northern Italy, the Gestapo moves swiftly. Jews are rounded up. Resistance groups form in the mountains. The first partisan attacks begin near Turin and Genoa. In reprisal, villages are burned, hostages shot, and curfews enforced with brutal efficiency. What began as liberation turns into a war within a war, Italians fighting Italians, partisans fighting fascists, Germans fighting everyone. Meanwhile, Allied command Naples. Eisenhower reads reports of German brutality with growing anger. He understands now that Italy is no longer a campaign, it's a political and moral front. Eisenhower's note to Washington, October 1943. Italy has ceased to be a battlefield alone, is now the test of Europe's conscience. The Americans push north toward Cassino. The British push up the Adriatic coast. And in between them, the soul of Italy burns. Narrator, V.O. From the ashes of Sicily rose not just victory, but revolution. The fall of Mussolini, the collapse of fascism, and the German occupation of Italy reshaped Europe's map and its heart. For the Allies, Sicily had been the first step into Axis territory. For Italy, it was the beginning of liberation and the beginning of suffering. The Duce was gone, but the price of his fall had only begun to be paid. Closing montage, visual suggestion. Footage of Mussolini's arrest and the Grand Council vote. German paratroopers descending over Rome. SS commandos rescuing Mussolini at Gran Sasso. Italian civilians waving Allied flags in Naples. Resistance fighters in the Apennines, rifles slung over their shoulders. October 1943, the Italian peninsula. The war that began in Sicily now moves north, across mountains older than empire and valleys shaped by centuries of war. The Allies have crossed the Strait of Messina. Behind them lies victory. Ahead lies endurance. The goal is clear: reach Rome, the first Axis capital to fall. But between the Allied armies and that prize lies one of the most formidable defensive landscapes in Europe. The Germans call it Festung Italien, Fortress Italy. Scene: Allied Command Naples, October 1943. General Dwight D. Eisenhower gathers his senior commanders in a converted monastery overlooking the bay. Rain lashes the windows. Mud seeps through the cracked stone floor. Maps of Italy cover the walls, crisscrossed with colored pins and penciled arrows. Each line represents a mountain, a river, or a German division. "Gentlemen," Eisenhower begins, "we hold Naples, but the enemy holds the mountains. We are not chasing him, he is waiting for us." The room falls silent. Everyone knows what that means: attrition, cold, and a long, grinding advance. The German defense, the winter line. The architect of that defense is Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, a master of delay and deception. He divides Italy into a series of fortified belts. The Volturno Line, first to slow the Allied pursuit. The Bernhard Line, a temporary shield. And finally, the Gustav Line, stretching from the Tyrrhenian to the Adriatic, anchored on a mountain monastery called Monte Cassino. Kesselring's plan is elegant and cruel: fight for time, trade ground for months, and bleed the Allies until their momentum dies. November 1943, the march north. The U.S. Fifth Army, under General Mark Clark, pushes up the western coast. The British Eighth Army, led by General Bernard Montgomery, advances on the Adriatic side. The weather turns against them. Rain floods the lowlands. Rivers swell into torrents. Vehicles sink axle-deep in mud. Convoys that cross deserts in North Africa now crawl through mire and fog. The soldiers nickname it the Mud Campaign. Private's letter, 45th Division. "We thought Sicily was hell. This is worse: rain that never stops in mountains that never end." November 3rd, 1943, Volturno River. American troops launch a night assault under artillery fire. The river is swollen, the current strong. Engineers build pontoon bridges under machine gun fire. Entire platoons are swept away, rifles and helmets bobbing in the current. By dawn, the beachhead is secure barely. The price is hundreds of lives. Kesselring pulls back, not broken but satisfied. He has delayed them another week. November 15th, 1943, the Adriatic front. Montgomery's troops reach Sangro River. They face German paratroopers dug into terraced hillsides. The attack begins in freezing rain. Mud clogs tank treads, and artillery shells sink before detonating. After 10 days of brutal fighting, the British advance just 5 miles. Sangro is the first hint of what's to come: a war of inches fought across mountains, monasteries, and ruins. December 1943, Allied fatigue and frustration. At Allied headquarters, morale sags. Eisenhower is recalled to London to begin planning for Operation Overlord. Command of the Mediterranean passes to Field Marshal Sir Henry Maitland Wilson. Patton, the warrior of Sicily, has been reassigned after his slapping incidents. Montgomery soon departs for England to prepare the British role in Normandy. The veterans of Sicily, the men who conquered the island together, are now scattered across different fronts. Italy, once the Allied focus, is now the forgotten front. January 1944, Monte Cassino, the monastery above the clouds. The Gustav Line looms ahead. At its heart rises Monte Cassino, a 1,000-year-old Benedictine abbey perched atop a 1,700-foot mountain. Below it winds the Liri Valley, the road to Rome. German artillery observers use the slopes to command every approach. To reach Rome, the Allies must climb that mountain. U.S. Fifth Army Intelligence Report. Monte Cassino is the keystone. Break it, and Italy will fall. But breaking it will take 5 months for major battles and over 75,000 casualties. January 22, 1944, Operation Shingle, the Anzio Landing. To bypass Cassino, the Allies gamble on an amphibious landing behind enemy lines at Anzio, 30 miles south of Rome. The goal: outflank the Gustav Line and cut off Kesselring's forces. Initial success comes easily. The beaches are lightly defended. But hesitation costs them. General John P. Lucas, cautious after the bloodbath at Salerno, delays the push inland. Within days, Kesselring reacts with lightning speed, surrounding the beachhead. For months, Anzio becomes a siege, a flat, shell-swept killing field where soldiers live in trenches and bunkers, bombarded daily. War correspondent Ernie Pyle writes, "We are not fighting for ground here. We are fighting to stay alive." February, May 1944, the battles of Monte Cassino. The assaults begin. American, British, Polish, Indian, New Zealand, and French colonial troops attack from every side. They climb sheer cliffs under artillery fire, through snow, rubble, and the shattered ruins of the ancient abbey, destroyed by Allied bombers who believe Germans occupied it. When the smoke clears, hundreds of monks and civilians lie dead, and the Germans still hold the heights, now entrenched in the ruins. For months, attacks fail again and again. The Liri Valley becomes a graveyard. May 1944, the breakthrough. At last, under General Juin's French Expeditionary Corps and the Polish II Corps, the Allies find the key, a flanking assault through the Orunsi Mountains. German resistance collapses. The Gustav Line is broken. Simultaneously, the Anzio forces finally break out. Rome lies open. June 4, 1944, Rome liberated. At 7 p.m., American tanks roll into the Eternal City. Civilians fill the streets, showering them with flowers. Bells ring from every church. After 9 months of mud and blood, the first Axis capital is free. But Eisenhower, now in England, barely notes it in his diary. 2 days later, June 6, 1944, D-Day, the eyes of the world turn to Normandy. Rome becomes a footnote in the greater storm.